Welcome into episode 103 of The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. I'm Ken Ray.
And I'm August Trometer.
The tale of the USB Harpoon, the endless battle against end-to-end encryption, and suing the search giant that is Google. If you were searching for The Checklist by SecureMac, you found it. Let's dive in. There's an old adage that says, never look a gift horse in the mouth. My assumption is that that's from a time when any horse was a good horse. Not that they were all healthy. Heck, it might not have even been a good horse. But here's the thing. Even a horse with issues might prove valuable in your work or get you where you wanted to go. We're talking way, way back in the day, of course. If it's free, if it's a gift horse, you say thanks, you take it for what it's worth, and you head down the road. At least that's the way it used to be. I say we need to retire that adage. Because rare at this point is a free thing actually free. Free search collects your information. Free video comes with commercials. And free electronics, well, who knows what they come with. Bleeping Computers says several security experts have built a malicious version of a USB charging cable, one that can compromise a computer in just a few seconds. Once plugged in, it turns into a peripheral device capable of typing and launching commands. USBHarpooning, as its makers call it, relies on the bad USB research from Karsten Knoll and his team at Security Research Labs. Their work showed that an attacker can program the controller chip of a USB drive and make it appear to the computer as a human interface device, or HID. The type of HID can be anything from an input device like a keyboard that issues a rapid succession of commands to a network card that modifies the system's DNS settings to redirect traffic. With USBHarpooning, the security experts replaced the USB drive with a charging cable, something that is as ubiquitous but less likely for users to be cautious of. The cable comes with modified connectors that allow both data and power to pass through, so it will fulfill the expected function. This feature enables it to be accompanied by any type of device that powers through USB, fans, for example, or dongles distributed at conferences, without raising suspicions about plugging the cable. So how scary is this? Well, assuming that these guys are the best and brightest tackling the issue, it's really not the scariest thing yet, because these guys are good guys. But the work they're doing could just as easily be done by bad guys, which is of course why they're doing it, to see what bad actors could do with existing technology. In fact, one of the principals in this story was trying to get a sample device off someone that he knew who had made something like USBHarpooning. When that person's device was unavailable, the guy challenged someone else to build it, and they did. Point being, this is not a one-off. Now, the good news around USBHarpooning is, as it stands right now, when things go bad, you know it. Quoting the report again, the USBHarpooning bad USB cable attack is successful on unlocked machines where it can launch commands that download and execute a payload. On Windows, the commands can run directly from the run prompt. On Mac and Linux, it could launch a terminal and work from there. The activity is visible on the screen, so the attacker has to come up with a method to hide it. One of the leads in the piece says the team is currently exploring methods to trigger the attack when the victim's not around. Now, if they're working on it, it's a pretty safe bet that others are working on it as well, and they may not be the kind of people who publish their findings, for everyone to see. Now, I was talking to Nicholas Raba earlier this week, and I posed a question to him. What I was wondering, because I've been tempted by the low-cost power cable. In fact, I'm thinking right now about a charger that I have that goes from my car to my phone that I bought at a dollar store in a small town in Kentucky. And it had the Made for iPhone logo on it. But, I could draw the Made for iPhone logo on something, right? So the question that I asked Nicholas Raba was, should Apple lower its prices on cables and chargers so that people won't be tempted, by cheap knockoffs on Amazon or someplace else? His take was, as the article pointed out, it's the freebies you really have to worry about. If you're trying to attack the most people, you make cables and devices really, really cheap to get them into as many hands as you can. So you're talking about freebies at trade shows. You're talking about giveaways. You're talking about putting a sticker that says MFI on it, or putting a sticker that says Salesforce. I mean, then maybe, Salesforce contracts out to somebody, and I'm just naming companies. Let's just say, ABC developer. Maybe, they contract out to somebody who's not on the up and up, or maybe somebody who's not on the up and up takes a bag of cables, puts ABC developer's logo on it, and then starts passing it out, complete with malware. So there are a few things that I'm wondering about from you, August. I mean, first, do you have a threshold for cables and peripherals? Like, is there a dollar amount? Is there brand loyalty? I mean, what kind of things do you look for? Or is this even anything that you consider when you go out to plug something into your computer?
Well, first of all, I want to point out that we're talking about something called USB-Harpoon, and I'm very disappointed that you didn't start this story off with, my name is Ishmael.
No,
or call me Ishmael.
Ishmael.
Call me Ishmael, yes. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. There you are, with a hump like a snow hill. I know what you're doing. Yes.
The thing is, this is actually a very clever attack, because we plug things into our computer all day long, and we just sort of inherently trust that whatever we're plugging in, is okay. But when it comes to being, an attack vector, it is the freebies that we need to worry about, because, these people are going to want something that gets to a lot of people, because the cost is in the hardware of it. And if they can't recoup that cost, then it really isn't worth anything to them. So if they're going to attack 100 people, then it really isn't worth it. But if it's going to be thousands and thousands, then obviously, the return on investment is much greater. So when you do go to the trade shows and you do get these free dongles and whatever, that's a much more interesting way of getting their malware onto your computer than, to be honest, selling through Amazon, I think, because the chances of, that many being sold on Amazon is a lot less than just giving them away. In terms of my threshold, I tend to stick mostly with manufacturer cables. In this case, it would be Apple. And this is going to sound silly, but it's because they're pretty. Oh,
they are. I mean, they are pretty, but I'll tell you honestly, I was talking with Nicholas Todchek about this earlier as well, and he said that he's had a fairly bad experience with Apple Lightning cables. They flex too much at the tip of the cable. He's had like 4 of them die on him well before they should have. On the other hand, he says no-name random brand cables he's picked up at a store or on Amazon have lasted way longer than Apple's official cables in his experience, and of course they're cheaper. For his money, literally and figuratively, he says Apple would need to increase the quality and lower the cost of their cables. But overall, he does agree with Nicholas Raba. It's the conference giveaways, and with you, actually, it's the conference giveaways that people need to worry about. They're potentially as problematic as someone picking up random USB thumb drives that they find in the parking lot at work and plugging that into their work computer. Do me a favor, because I want to dig a little deeper into this conference idea. Just for fun, put on your evil genius hat. Would you rather give this stuff away in a bag of goodies at Comic-Con or some sort of like fan convention? I really should stop using actual brand names because I don't want to make anybody afraid of any particular thing. Would you want to give these out at like some sort of random fan convention or some sort of security convention? Well, they wouldn't fly at a security convention, but maybe a tech conference, say, or some sort of political con, or all the above?
Well, it would depend on what my goal is. If it's just, attacking mass computers, then probably, a comic-based convention
right,
might be a good attack. If it's, technical stuff that I'm after, then a tech convention. And if it's more political dirt on somebody, then maybe I go for, some sort of political convention. I really do think that this has to be sort of targeted at an audience, unless that audience is so great that, they're just pulling information off your computer, sending it somewhere, and then using that information to do nefarious things. Beyond that, I think the investment required, they're going to have sort of a goal in mind in order to make it worth anything.
Yeah, there probably should be some sort of education campaign around cheap or free not being worth it, or really around free not being worth it. Although I thought about some cheap stuff as well. Like, I couldn't help thinking about the cheap Internet of Things, discount toys, picture frames, stuff like that sold at, dollar stores and pharmacies, right? I mean, this seems like a threat along those lines to me, and vice versa, really. Like, just because you paid $5 for something doesn't mean it doesn't come with something bad, or something that might drop something on your computer that you didn't know or didn't want there.
Sure, but then, my thought is, if I'm the attacker, do I want somebody who, wants to spend the least amount possible on a cable? Is there going to be information on that computer that I can actually harvest and use in order to, further my goals? Or do I want to shoot for a higher end clientele? And I don't know what the answer to that question is, but there's definitely different strata in terms of the information you get off a computer and the kind of people who, buy various things.
Yeah, well, it's not necessarily just about getting information from you. It's also about turning the stuff that you own into part of a botnet. As well. Sure. It's not just, that picture frame is going to steal all of my banking information, but rather that picture frame, who knows what else that picture frame is doing while it's sitting there theoretically showing me pictures of my kids and grandparents. Really quickly, we actually covered information of things all the way back in checklist number 42, including problems and pitfalls, Apple and the Internet of Things, and ways to be smart with smart devices. Top of that list, I guess, would be look that gift horse in the mouth. Just because it's free doesn't mean it's worth it. And if you want to go more the IoT way, that's checklist number 42, which you can find at SecureMac.com/checklist. The endless battle against end-to-end encryption rolls on. Apple Insider cites a Reuters report that says the U.S. Department of Justice wants Facebook to disable or otherwise break end-to-end encryption in its messenger text and voice messaging service as part of a criminal investigation into the MS-13 gang. I wanted to say, here's the problem, but you know what the problem is. According to Apple Insider, the social media giant has so far refused, saying that the only way to comply with DOJ demands is to rewrite the encryption code that protects all Messenger users, or, alternatively, hack the lone target. Now, this is something I think we've talked about before on the checklist, and it's definitely something that I've talked about on macOS Ken. Authorities will keep fighting and keep fighting and keep fighting cases against end-to-end encryption because the first time they win one, they've gone a long way towards winning them all. Quoting Apple Insider again, if the court decides in favor of the government, the DOJ could use the case as precedent to force other companies to break their respective encryption solutions for surveillance purposes. Apple's iMessage and FaceTime, the latter of which offers both video and voice calling, are end-to-end encrypted and would likely be viewed under the same legal auspices as Facebook's Messenger platform. I mean, this feels to me like it is. There's a thing. I don't know if it's sounding or what it is, but basically you just like keep poking until you find a weak spot on something, or until you find a deep spot, and then once you find that, then you won the game at that point. I mean, this is just authorities all over the place fighting court cases all over the place against whatever end-to-end encryption they can find, because once they do that, then it's Katie bar the door.
Well, and I think it takes one company to cave, and Apple has kind of planted a flag in the ground and saying we're not going there. Mm-hmm. And there's no guarantee that they're going to keep that flag planted. but it's all of the companies that are sort of under attack. And sooner or later, one of them is going to just go, it's just not worth fighting. And that's the crack. Yeah. That's how they get in.
It was interesting, actually, in the same week that this happened, I think I saw a piece that said that Skype had actually turned on end-to-end encryption in its voice calling. So it's kind of weird that, well, it's not weird. I mean, it's actually, it's good and it's commendable that, in the face of the government saying, no, seriously, we need this. No, seriously, we need this. You actually have as big a player as Skype saying, yeah, but until somebody says that legally you need this, we're going to go ahead and actually, make these things a bit tighter.
That's awesome.
The other thing that drives me crazy, and it's human nature, as Michael Jackson might have said. It's it's the kids. Oh, it's the trafficking in the children. That's why we need to break end-to-end encryption. That didn't work. Okay, it's terrorism. Terrorism is why. Oh, that didn't do it. Okay, MS-13. MS-13 is the reason we need to do this. I mean, and the thing is, I get it. I've said this, I know, on other shows before. We ask a lot from law enforcement. The second something crashes on your front lawn, you want somebody to explain why they didn't keep it from crashing on your front lawn. We want a lot from law enforcement. But, I mean, that can't be, or shouldn't be anyway, at the expense of the security of our communications, I think.
I totally agree.
So just so I have you on the record, is there any such thing as a backdoor that will only work for the good guys?
No. If you have a key that unlocks encryption, where are you going to store that key in such a way that people can't just walk in, take the key, copy it, and do whatever they want with it? And you can't do that. And that's the real problem for law enforcement, is because they believe this key exists and it doesn't. Because as soon as the key exists for the good guys, the bad guys are going to get hold of it, and they're going to do a lot worse with it than the good guys will.
We'll revisit some of the Google news and not necessarily news in a moment, but first a word about MacScan 3 from SecureMac. Back to another old adage. We started the show with an old adage, and now here's another one. Macs are not vulnerable to security threats. All right, that one's never actually been true, but it's less true today than it's ever been. More and more people are using Macs, which means more and more hackers are trying to hack in. In fact, the number of malicious files for Macs has increased exponentially over the last decade. You need to stay ahead of the bad guys, and MacScan 3 can help. MacScan 3 is a great defense against malicious software attacks aimed at your Mac. It's developed by SecureMac. You know those guys. Trusted names in computer security and developers of exceptional security software for the Mac for well over a decade. MacScan 3 detects and removes Mac malware, catches keyloggers, removes tracking cookies, and provides full-range or targeted scanning, all without crowding up your hard drive or slowing down your computer. Say goodbye to worry and hello to the cushy comfort of security with MacScan 3 from SecureMac. Sign up for a 30-day trial today at securemac.com/MacScan. That's MacScan 3 by SecureMac. Your 30-day free trial is waiting at securemac.com/MacScan. Right, we'll wrap up the day with a revisit, a follow-up to a story we brought you last week. Way back then, we read in the Next Web that Google was tracking us even if we told Google not to track us. Highlighting a report from the Associated Press, the Next Web explained, the story drew from UC Berkeley graduate researcher Kay Shankari's experience of her Android device keeping tabs on her movements while she had location history turned off. Blogging back in May, she said that at one point Google prompted her to rate a shopping trip to Kohl's, something the company could only have known about had they been tracking her location. The AP then traced another researcher's movements with similar settings on his phone and found that they were able to follow his footsteps around New York. Now, the thing is, you're supposed to be able to choose whether you want to share your location with Google, yet turning off location history did not turn off location history. I mean, it may have killed a particular function, but Google was still able to figure out where you were and where you'd been. So now Google is going to court. Ars Technica says, as a result of the practice uncovered by the AP report, Google has been sued by a guy in San Diego. The suit argues that Google is violating the California Invasion of Privacy Act and the state's constitutional right to privacy. The report says the lawsuit seeks class action status, and it would include both an Android class and an iPhone class for the potential millions of people in the U.S. with such phones who turned off their location history and nonetheless had it recorded by Google. It will likely take months or longer for the judge to determine whether there is a sufficient class. Now, while all that's happening, the piece says attorneys from the Electronic Privacy Information Center are urging the Federal Trade Commission to examine whether the company is in breach of its 2011 consent decree with the agency. In that settlement, the piece explains, Google agreed that it would not misrepresent anything related to, 1, the purpose for which it collects and uses covered information, and 2, the extent to which consumers may exercise control over the collection, use, or disclosure of covered information. Until the Associated Press story on the 13th of August, Google's policy simply stated, you can turn off location history at any time. With location history off, the places you go are no longer stored. This turns out to not be true. Google did not respond to a request for comment from Ars Technica. Now, I'll tell you, I got into a discussion with a lawyer recently. I'd said something on another show about hating frivolous lawsuits, and he thought for some reason that in saying I hate frivolous lawsuits, what I meant was I hate all lawsuits. First of all, that's not what I said. And second, I don't hate this lawsuit. I'm curious what your take on it is.
You know, I'm with you. I think that sometimes we get a little sue happy. And lawsuits can become really frivolous. The lady with the hot coffee, for example.
Don't bring that one up. No, we're going to get so many emails, dude. Because I said, I actually mentioned that one like that quickly. And I got so many emails and responses. So direct yours to August, if you will. And I feel certain his email must be someplace. I kind of don't want to address that one. Yeah, let's move on. We understand the hot coffee thing was a real thing, and we also have our own feelings about it, and we're allowed to. Okay.
Anyway, my take is, I think sometimes you need a lawsuit to affect change, because going through our legal system, from a law point of view, getting Congress to enact laws or your state to enact laws takes a lot longer than putting something in front of a judge and letting that judge decide whether or not, something is right or wrong. And I think this is one of those cases where, Google is clearly doing something it's not supposed to be doing. So let's just put it out there in front of a judge and let the judge decide.
See, the difficult part about the whole thing is, maybe with the whole consent decree, it's doing something it's not supposed to be doing. Because apparently part of what they had to say was, yeah, listen, if we say something, we mean that thing, right? If we say you can turn off tracking this information, what we mean is you can turn off tracking this information. And that turns out not to have been the case. But we were talking last week about not knowing whether, because there are so many different things that Google is into and so many different parts of our lives and so many different parts of our phones and our computers and all of it that they're into, that they may even be able to stand there legally and say, look, location notification was turned off or location history was turned off. And so in this little portion where we track location history, there's nothing there. Never mind the fact that they've got so much other information that they're able to follow it. Now, this actually brings me to another question that I've had. 10 years ago, I believe 10 years ago this month is when this phrase started entering our collective consciousness. 10 years ago, we heard that some banks were too big to fail. And what I was wondering is Google too big to stop at this point?
Boy, I don't know if they're too big to stop, but it's going to be awfully tough. I mean, if you think about Google as a charging bull, could you stop a charging bull? Sure. But do you want to be the guy standing in front of the bull who's going to do it? No.
Yeah. No, we need to find alien civilizations, and that'll be the cape that we wave, right? Because you don't really stop a bull, you just kind of distract it and get it to run off in a different direction and not kill you, right? So we'll just need to say, hey, Google, Mars, am I right? And they'll be like, yeah, we're going to get their information, I guess. That was a horrible analogy.
I do take comfort in kind of looking at the past, and Microsoft used to be like Google in that they pretty much did whatever they wanted, and everyone had to put up with it. And then they started getting some serious competition from even little companies like Firefox, which, almost took away their browser share. And then, of course, Apple staged its comeback, and now Microsoft, it seems to play well with others anymore, which is really, really great to see that, they noticed that stuff matters.
It is interesting to think about, right? I mean, before Google, there was Yahoo. And before Facebook, there was MySpace. And before MySpace, there was Friendster. But the only thing is, each one learned from the one before. It's hard to see something coming along, that's going to unseat Facebook and all of the digging into our information that it's doing. It's also hard to see, something coming along that's going to unseat Google because, again, it's got its roots planted pretty deeply. I did ask you last week, by the way, but I'll follow up now. Are you still using Google on your iPhone as opposed to DuckDuckGo or some other less egregious search provider?
Oh, you guilted me into DuckDuckGo.
Did I seriously?
Yeah.
Wow, I was kidding.
It's one of those things where, and it's really not so much from a Google is tracking my location point of view, but more, hey, what does DuckDuckGo offer me that I can't get with Google? And let my muscle memory and sort of the way my head organizes things has been shaped by Google. So I'm letting DuckDuckGo try and reshape that.
The thing is, as I told you last week, I've been using DuckDuckGo on my phone for a while, and I get exactly what you're saying. You want it to be what it's always been, and sometimes it's frustrating that DuckDuckGo seems to give me answers that are nothing like the kind of thing I would normally be looking for. And then I remember, oh yeah, that's why I'm using DuckDuckGo. So I do have to say really quickly, there is this other story out there that's starting to get some traction, though it doesn't seem to me that it necessarily should. A professor at Vanderbilt University says Google can track a user's activity online even if that person is using the Chrome browser's incognito mode. Incognito is Google's anonymized or private browsing mode. You want to see something you don't want people to see that you're seeing, for whatever reason, you use incognito mode. But a piece from the Washington Post says that the Vanderbilt study claims Google can link anonymized data collected by advertising cookies to people's Google accounts. Emphasis on can. Here's the bit from the Post. The researcher said he found evidence that Google has the capability to link anonymized data with information from people's Google accounts while they are signed out from their Google accounts or using a private browsing mode called incognito mode on Google's Chrome browser. Now, a few things to know here. The study was paid for by Digital Content Next, a lobbying group that represents the digital publishing industry. They are no fans of Google's. There's also no evidence that Google has violated the rules around incognito mode, just that they could. Which, yeah, they could. Apple could. Apple could track you all over the place. They could keep that information forever. They could sell the information. They could do all sorts of things. They could. Until they do, I won't say that there's no need to worry, but there's no need to worry. Or there's not as much need to worry. Is Google worth keeping an eye on? Absolutely. But the incognito story, it's a story. I'm not sure it's a true story. the whole thing felt kind of hinky to me. It felt like people trying to make Google look worse. And good luck to you if you think you can make Google look worse than Google often does in these situations. I'm amazed that you're using DuckDuckGo. I actually had a bit to end the show. I was going to ask you again if you had switched since the last time I asked you, but now I feel like we need to check back in a couple of weeks and see how it's going for you.
Yeah. And that's not an endorsement, by the way. I'm not endorsing any particular brand or service or convention that might have to do with comic books.
Thanks for bringing it home. As always, we just covered, the tips of these stories. If you'd like to dig deeper into any of them, we will have links available for all of them in one place. SecureMac.com/checklist. Not only will you find notes for today's show, but you'll find notes for any show that we've done before. And you'll actually find a place to listen to all of those shows as well. Like I mentioned, that Internet of Things episode number 42 of the checklist. You will find that at SecureMac.com/checklist. If you have a question you'd like to ask or a topic you would like to hear us hit, our email address is checklist@securemac.com. The address again is checklist@securemac.com. And if you can't remember that, please do remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. And we'll talk to you next week.